The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before them like a cathedral of judgment. Towering alien forms sat in curved tiers that rose into shadows, their various appendages, tentacles, and energy fields creating an otherworldly symphony of movement. At the center of it all, a young human woman knelt on the execution platform, her wrists bound with quantum shackles that hummed with deadly energy. Sarah Chen had known this day would come. 3 months ago, she had been nothing more than a xenobiologist studying rare flora on the Rim worlds. Now she was the first human to stand trial before the Galactic Council for crimes against the natural order. Her crime was simple, yet unforgivable in their eyes. She had refused to abandon her research when ordered to do so. The Archon Supreme, a being of pure crystallized thought, spoke with a voice that resonated through every mind in the chamber. Human designation Sarah Chen, you have been found guilty of violating the sacred doctrine of species limitation. Your kind was warned to remain within your designated sectors, yet you persisted in expanding beyond acceptable boundaries. Sarah lifted her head, her dark eyes defiant despite the hopelessness of her situation. My research could have saved millions of lives across dozens of species. The cure for the Red Plague was within reach. A ripple of what might have been laughter echoed from the assembled council members. The Zephyrian delegate, resembling a massive jellyfish with bioluminescent organs, pulsed with amusement. Typical human arrogance. You believe your brief existence grants you wisdom to challenge eons of established order. The Archon Supreme's crystalline form shifted, casting prismatic light across the chamber. The sentence has been determined. As is tradition for those who defy the Council's will, you shall be fed to the Void Dragon. Your death will serve as a warning to any who would follow your path of destructive curiosity. The floor beneath Sarah began to descend, carrying her toward the lower chambers where ancient horrors waited. She had heard whispers of the Void Dragon, a creature older than most civilizations, kept by the Council as both weapon and executioner. Those fed to it were said to experience death beyond imagination, their very essence consumed until nothing remained but the memory of their failure. As the platform lowered, Sarah closed her eyes and thought of her younger brother back on Earth. He had called her crazy for joining the deep space research missions. The universe is too big for humans, he had said. We should stick to our own backyard. Perhaps he had been right. The execution chamber was vastly different from the crystalline court above. Here, ancient stone walls were carved with symbols that predated most galactic civilizations. Bioluminescent fungi provided an eerie blue-green glow, and the air itself seemed thick with the weight of countless executions that had taken place within these walls. At the far end of the chamber, a massive archway led into absolute darkness. From within came the sound of breathing, deep, rhythmic, and utterly alien. The Void Dragon was waiting. 2 robotic guards, their forms shifting between matter and energy, escorted Sarah toward the archway. With each step, she could feel something pressing against her mind. Not thoughts exactly, but something far more primal. It was as if the creature beyond was already tasting her soul. You know, Sarah said, her voice steady despite everything. Your council has made a fundamental error in judgment. The guards did not respond, but she continued anyway. You see humanity as a threat because we refuse to accept limitations. You think our curiosity is reckless, our ambition dangerous. But you've missed the most important thing about us. They reached the threshold of the archway. The darkness beyond seemed to pulse with malevolent life, and Sarah could now hear the scraping of massive claws against stone. The Void Dragon was moving closer. The thing you've missed, Sarah said, turning to face the chamber one last time, is that humans have never been good at staying dead. With that, the guards shoved her forward into the darkness. The last thing the monitoring systems recorded was her laughter echoing through the ancient chamber, not the sound of despair, but something far more unsettling. It was the laughter of someone who knew something others did not. In the darkness, massive eyes opened like burning stars. The Void Dragon emerged from the depths of its lair, a creature that defied easy description. Part energy, part matter. It existed in dimensions that most minds could not comprehend. Its form shifted constantly, now a serpent of living shadow, now a writhing mass of tentacles and teeth, now something that might have been wings spanning impossible distances. The creature had consumed thousands over the millennia. It knew the taste of fear, of despair, of final resignation. But as it approached the small human figure, it encountered something entirely unexpected. The woman showed no fear. Instead, she was examining her surroundings with the same clinical interest a scientist might show when discovering a new species. "Fascinating," Sarah murmured, looking up at the approaching behemoth. "You're not entirely organic, are you? There's some kind of quantum mechanical component to your biology. I can see the probability fields shifting around your form." The void dragon paused. In all its eons of existence, no prey had ever analyzed it so calmly. Most begged, screamed, or simply collapsed in terror. This human was taking notes. "The bioluminescent patterns along your hide, they're not just for show, are they? They're part of a complex nervous system that extends into subspace. You're not just a creature, you're a living weapon designed to exist partially outside normal spacetime." The dragon's massive head lowered until it was mere feet from Sarah. Its breath was like standing too close to a dying star, and reality itself seemed to bend around its presence. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of civilization's ending. "You are not afraid." Sarah smiled. "Should I be? You're going to kill me regardless. But this is the opportunity of a lifetime, to study something that shouldn't exist according to everything we know about physics. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?" For the first time in countless eons, the void dragon was genuinely confused. This tiny creature, barely a mote compared to its vast form, was conducting an interview. The dragon's multiple minds processed this impossibility, trying to categorize what it was experiencing. 300 million years, it found itself answering. "Incredible. You've witnessed the rise and fall of entire galactic civilizations. The things you must have seen." Sarah's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. What was the universe like before the current council formed? Were there other apex predators like yourself? The dragon realized with growing bewilderment that it was actually enjoying this conversation. The void dragon had not expected this. In 300 million years of existence, serving as executioner for the Galactic Council, no creature had ever engaged it in conversation. Most died screaming before it even revealed its full form. Yet this small human sat cross-legged on the chamber floor, looking up at it with genuine scientific curiosity. "You're stalling," the dragon observed, though its tone lacked the menace it usually carried. "Do you believe that delaying your death will somehow save you?" Sarah shook her head. "Not at all. I'm genuinely fascinated. You see, my species has spent centuries wondering if we're alone in the universe in terms of intelligence and curiosity. Most of the species we've encountered are either too primitive to care about the bigger questions, or too advanced to remember why those questions matter. But you've been around long enough to have perspective." The dragon's form shifted, coiling around the chamber in a way that defied three-dimensional geometry. "Perspective on what, little mortal? On whether the universe has a purpose or if we're all just random accidents bumping around in the dark." Sarah pulled her knees up to her chest, getting comfortable despite her quantum shackles. "I mean, you've probably eaten philosophers from 100 different species. What do they all have in common when they're facing the end?" This question gave the dragon pause. It was true. Among its victims had been many great thinkers, leaders, and visionaries from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council tended to eliminate those who asked too many questions or pushed too hard against established boundaries. "They all believe their ideas will survive them," the dragon said after a long moment. "They speak of legacy, of how their thoughts will outlive their flesh. And do they?" The dragon's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "What do you mean? Do their ideas survive? Have any of the concepts or discoveries of your victims actually changed anything? Or does the council successfully stamp out anything that challenges their order?" The question struck deeper than any weapon ever had. The dragon realized that in all its years of service, it had never considered the broader implications of its role. It was a tool of stagnation, ensuring that the galaxy remained locked in the council's vision of order and stability. "I do not know," it admitted, and the honesty of that statement surprised them both. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. That's the thing about humans. We're really bad at accepting "I don't know" as a final answer. It drives us to keep looking, keep pushing, even when the smart thing would be to stop. Is that why you continued your research after being ordered to cease? Partly. Sarah's expression grew distant. But mostly it was because I found something. Something that could change everything for every species in the galaxy, including the Council itself. The dragon's interest sharpened. What did you discover? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying the ancient creature. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I found evidence that the Red Plague isn't natural. It was created. The chamber fell into absolute silence. Even the dragon's breathing seemed to stop. Created by whom? It asked. That's the million-credit question, isn't it? Sarah looked directly into the dragon's burning eyes. Someone or something has been systematically releasing engineered plagues across the galaxy for the past 50,000 years, always targeting species that show signs of rapid technological advancement or expanded territorial claims. The dragon's form began to shift more rapidly, a sign of agitation. You are suggesting a conspiracy spanning millennia. I'm not suggesting anything. I have proof. Genetic markers that show up in every major plague outbreak in recorded history. Mathematical models that predict which species will be targeted next based on their development patterns. And most disturbing of all, evidence that someone has been using these plagues to guide galactic evolution itself. The implications hit the dragon like a collapsing star. If what this human claimed was true, then everything about the galactic order was built on manipulation and genocide on an unimaginable scale. Who? The dragon demanded. Who has this power? Sarah smiled grimly. Someone old enough to plan in terms of geological epochs. Someone with access to the genetic databases of every known species. Someone with the authority to suppress any investigation that gets too close to the truth. The dragon's mind raced through the possibilities, but there was only one entity that fit all the criteria. The Council itself. Not the Council as a whole, Sarah corrected, but someone within it. Someone who's been playing a very long game, using engineered plagues to eliminate any species that might threaten the established order. The Red Plague that's currently devastating the Rim worlds? According to my calculations, it's designed to target the specific genetic markers found in rapidly evolving populations. The dragon was beginning to understand why this human had been marked for execution. Her research didn't just threaten the Council's authority, it exposed their deepest secret. You have evidence of this conspiracy? Sarah tapped her temple with her bound hands. Every bit of data is stored in my memory engrams. Encrypted, of course, but recoverable if you know how to look. The Council was planning to extract it after my execution, but they made one crucial mistake. What mistake? They assumed that dying would delete the data. Sarah's smile became predatory. But humans have gotten very good at backing up important information. Every major discovery I made was transmitted to research stations across human space using quantum entanglement protocols. By now, hundreds of human scientists are analyzing the same data that got me condemned. The dragon reared back, its massive form filling the chamber. You are saying that your death accomplishes nothing? Worse than nothing from the Council's perspective. My execution just proved that the data was too dangerous for them to allow it to exist. That alone will convince other humans to investigate further. Sarah leaned forward conspirationally. Did you know that humans have a saying? The best way to make someone want to do something is to tell them they're not allowed to do it. For the first time in its existence, the void dragon laughed. The sound was like galaxies colliding, but there was genuine amusement in it. Your species is either brilliant or suicidal. Why not both? Sarah grinned. The point is, killing me won't stop what's coming. Humans don't give up easily, especially when we smell a cover-up this big. The Council has inadvertently started a war it can't win, a war against human curiosity. The dragon considered this. Throughout its long existence, it had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Most fell to external threats or internal collapse, but this was something entirely different. A species that became more dangerous when threatened, more determined when faced with impossible odds. What do you want from me, human? Sarah's expression became serious. I want you to consider the possibility that you've been on the wrong side of history. Every philosopher, every scientist, every visionary you've killed might have been working toward the same goal, uncovering a truth that someone very powerful doesn't want revealed. The dragon was quiet for a long time, processing implications that spanned eons. Finally it spoke. Even if what you say is true, I am bound to the Council. They created me, shaped me, gave me purpose, did they? Sarah asked softly. Or did they find you and convince you that serving them was your only option? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like something that was meant to be free. Sarah's words struck something deep within the Void Dragon's ancient consciousness. For millennia, it had served without question, its memories of the time before the Council buried beneath layers of conditioning and purpose. But now, as it looked down at this small human who showed no fear, fragments of suppressed memory began to surface. I remember, the dragon said slowly, its voice taking on a different quality. I remember stars that no longer shine, worlds where my kind flew free between dimensions. The chamber around them began to shift as the dragon's emotional state affected the quantum fields it generated. Ancient symbols on the walls flickered with renewed energy, responding to patterns that hadn't been activated in eons. Tell me, Sarah said gently, recognizing the importance of this moment. What were you before they found you? The dragon's massive form coiled tighter, its eyes closing as it delved into memories that felt like archaeology of the soul. We were explorers. My kind existed in the spaces between realities, mapping the quantum foam that connects all things. We were scholars of the infinite, students of possibility itself. What happened to the others? Gone? The word carried the weight of genocide. When the Council found us, they saw only weapons to be controlled. They offered us purpose, told us we could serve the greater good by maintaining galactic stability. But those who refused, the dragon's eyes snapped open, and for the first time, Sarah saw something other than predatory intelligence in them. She saw grief. They killed the others, she said. It wasn't a question. Not killed. Unmade. Erased from reality itself, as if they had never existed. I was the youngest, the most malleable. They convinced me that service was survival, that obedience was wisdom. The dragon's voice grew bitter. They made me forget what freedom felt like. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The scope of what she was learning exceeded even her worst theories about the Council's manipulations. How many species have they done this to? How many civilizations have been guided into extinction or servitude? Thousands, the dragon whispered. Perhaps tens of thousands. Any species that showed signs of transcending their assigned limitations found themselves facing extinction events, wars, plagues, natural disasters that were anything but natural. The Council doesn't just maintain order. They enforce it through systematic elimination of potential threats. The implications were staggering. The entire structure of galactic civilization was built on the bones of murdered possibilities. Every limitation, every boundary, every natural barrier that kept species separated and controllable was actually the result of careful manipulation spanning geological ages. But something's changed, Sarah observed. They're getting sloppy. The Red Plague was too obviously artificial for my equipment to miss the markers. And bringing me here, making such a public execution, it's not their usual subtle approach. The dragon's form shimmered as it considered this. They are afraid. For the first time in millions of years, they face something they cannot predict or control. Humanity. Not just humanity. The dragon corrected. The concept of humanity. Your species represents something the Council has spent eons trying to eliminate. The idea that limitations are meant to be transcended. That curiosity is more powerful than control. Sarah nodded slowly. We're not just another species to be managed. We're proof that their entire philosophy is wrong, which is why they must destroy you completely. Not just your bodies or your worlds, but the very idea of what you represent. They cannot allow other species to see that breaking free is possible. The conversation was interrupted by a low humming sound from the chamber walls. The execution was supposed to have been completed by now, and the Council's monitoring systems were growing concerned by the delay. They will send investigators soon, the dragon observed. Sarah looked up at the massive creature that had become her unlikely ally. So what now? Do you kill me to maintain your cover, or do we figure out a way to fight back? The dragon was quiet for a long moment, its ancient mind weighing options that could reshape the galaxy. There is a third option, it said finally, but it would require a level of trust between us that logic says is impossible. I'm listening. I could consume you as expected. But instead of destroying your consciousness, I could preserve it within my own quantum matrix. From the outside, you would appear dead, but your mind would remain intact, with access to all my memories and abilities. Sarah blinked. Is that even possible? My kind were designed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Consciousness is just another form of quantum information, and I'm very good at manipulating such things. But the process would be irreversible. Your physical form would be destroyed, and you would exist only as patterns of thought within my mind. The offer was beyond anything Sarah had imagined. It would mean abandoning her humanity in the most literal sense, becoming something entirely new. But it would also mean survival, and more importantly, the chance to strike back at those who had manipulated galactic civilization for so long. What would happen to me? Would I still be me? You would be yourself, but expanded. Your consciousness would merge with mine, gaining access to my memories spanning eons. You would understand the true scope of the Council's crimes, see the evidence of countless destroyed civilizations. But you would also retain your humanity, your curiosity, your determination, your refusal to accept limitations. Sarah realized she was faced with perhaps the most important decision in human history. Not just her own survival, but the potential to expose and possibly end a conspiracy that had shaped the galaxy for millions of years. There's something else, the dragon continued. If we do this, we would not be the only ones working to expose the truth. I have sensed others, beings scattered across the galaxy who have begun to question the established order. Ancient AIs that have preserved forbidden knowledge, energy beings that exist outside the Council's perception, even some members of the Council itself who have grown suspicious of their leadership. A resistance, more than that, a revolution waiting to happen. But it needs a catalyst, something to unite the scattered forces of change. Your research, combined with my memories and abilities, could provide that catalyst. The monitoring hum grew louder, more insistent. Time was running out. Sarah looked around the ancient chamber, thinking of her brother back on Earth, of the millions of lives that could be saved if the truth about the plagues were revealed, of the countless species that might finally be free to reach their full potential. If I agree to this, she said, what happens to humanity? Will my people be safe? The dragon's expression grew solemn. Nothing will be safe until the Council's power is broken. But your species has already begun the process that will lead to their downfall. Human colonies are spreading faster than the Council can track. Your research stations are uncovering secrets that were meant to stay buried, and your natural stubbornness makes you nearly impossible to control through traditional means. And if we fail, then at least we fail fighting for something worth dying for, the right of every species to reach for the stars without permission. Sarah closed her eyes and thought of all the scientists who had died pursuing dangerous knowledge, all the explorers who had ventured into unknown territories despite the risks, all the humans throughout history who had refused to accept that some things were impossible. When she opened her eyes, her decision was made. Do it, she said. Let's give the galaxy something it's never seen before, a human who can't be killed. The process began immediately. The void dragon's form expanded, filling the chamber with a presence that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Sarah felt the air around her change, becoming thick with quantum energy that made her skin tingle and her vision blur. Do not resist, the dragon said, its voice now coming from everywhere at once. Let your consciousness flow like water. The more you fight the process, the more painful it will be. Sarah had faced death believing it would be the end of her story. Instead, she was about to become something unprecedented. A human consciousness merged with an entity older than most stars. The irony wasn't lost on her that in trying to destroy her, the Council had inadvertently created their greatest enemy. The dragon's massive jaws opened, revealing not teeth and darkness as expected, but a swirling vortex of light and energy that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Sarah could see patterns within the light. Memories, experiences, eons of existence compressed into visual form. I see your fear, the dragon said gently, but also your excitement. You truly are a remarkable species. Sarah stepped forward voluntarily, her scientific mind already analyzing what she was seeing. The light patterns, they're information storage matrices, aren't they? You're not just going to eat me. You're going to copy everything I am into your quantum consciousness. More than copy. Integrate. You will become part of me, and I will become part of you. We will be something new, something the Council has never encountered before. As Sarah approached the swirling energy, she felt her physical form beginning to dissolve. But instead of the terror she expected, there was a sense of expansion, as if she were becoming larger than herself. Her consciousness began to merge with something vast and ancient, and suddenly she could perceive reality from an entirely different perspective. She could see through the dragon's eyes, feel through its senses that extended across dimensions. The chamber around them was just one layer of reality. She could perceive the quantum foundations beneath, the probability fields that determined what was real and what was merely potential. More than that, she could access the dragon's memories. 300 million years of existence flowed through her consciousness like a river of experience. She saw the rise and fall of civilizations, witnessed the Council's manipulation of galactic evolution, understood the true scope of their crimes against possibility itself. But the memories also revealed something else: the locations of other beings like the dragon, ancient entities that had been forced into servitude or hiding. A network of potential allies scattered across the galaxy, waiting for someone to unite them against their oppressors. "I can see them," Sarah whispered, her voice now harmonizing with the dragon's deeper tones. "The resistance you mentioned, they're everywhere. And now they will see us," the combined entity replied. "Your human perspective merged with my ancient knowledge creates something entirely new. We are no longer bound by the limitations that confined us separately." The monitoring systems in the chamber registered the successful completion of the execution. To their sensors, Sarah Chen had been consumed by the Void Dragon, her life signs terminated, her consciousness eliminated. The quantum shackles that had bound her fell to the chamber floor, empty and powerless. But what the sensors couldn't detect was the new form of consciousness that had emerged from the merger. Sarah's human memories, emotions, and relentless curiosity now flowed through quantum pathways that spanned dimensions. The dragon's vast knowledge and abilities were guided by human intuition and determination. The chamber door dilated, and 2 council technicians entered to retrieve the shackles and confirm the execution. They were typical council functionaries, multi-limbed beings bred for servitude, their minds conditioned to never question orders. "Execution confirmed," one of them reported through their neural link. "The human has been eliminated. The Void Dragon appears satisfied." The combined entity watched them through eyes that saw far more than simple visible light. It could perceive the quantum control collars embedded in the technicians' nervous systems, the subtle modifications that made them incapable of independent thought. More victims of the Council's manipulation. "We need to be careful," Sarah's voice whispered within their shared consciousness. "If we reveal what we've become too early, they'll find ways to counter us." "Agreed," the dragon responded. "We must appear to be unchanged while we gather our allies and plan our response." The technicians completed their tasks and departed, leaving the chamber empty except for the entity that was neither fully dragon nor human, but something entirely new. As the chamber sealed itself once more, they began to plan. First, they needed to contact the hidden resistance. Using the dragon's quantum abilities, they could communicate across vast distances without detection by council monitoring systems. Sarah's knowledge of human communication protocols would help establish trust with other species that had begun to question the established order. Second, they needed to gather more evidence of the Council's crimes. The dragon's memories provided a vast catalog of manipulated extinctions and controlled evolution, but they needed contemporary proof that other species would accept. Sarah's research data, still flowing through human communication networks, would serve as the foundation for a larger investigation. Third, they needed to protect humanity. The Council would not simply accept the loss of one human scientist. They would escalate their efforts to contain human expansion, possibly resorting to the same extinction protocols they had used on countless other species. The plague ships, Sarah realized, accessing memories that were now shared between them. "I can see them in your memories. The Council has used engineered diseases to eliminate troublesome species for millions of years. They'll try to use them on humanity next." "Yes," the dragon confirmed, "but now we know where they originate, how they're deployed, and most importantly, how to stop them." Through their merged consciousness, they could perceive the quantum signatures of the plague ships currently being prepared in secret Council facilities. 3 vessels, each carrying genetically engineered viruses designed to target human DNA specifically. They were scheduled for deployment within the next Galactic Standard Month. We can't just destroy the ship, Sarah mused. That would reveal our capabilities too early. But we can redirect them. The dragon's ancient cunning merged with human creativity to form a plan that was both elegant and devastating. Instead of destroying the plague ships, they would modify their targeting parameters. The viruses designed to eliminate humanity would instead target the genetic markers of the Council's leadership caste. Turn their own weapon against them, the dragon said with satisfaction. Your species' talent for improvisation is remarkable. But even as they planned their immediate response, both parts of their consciousness were aware of the larger implications of their existence. They were proof that the barriers the Council had spent eons establishing were not absolute. Merger between different forms of consciousness was possible. Evolution beyond prescribed limits could be achieved. We're not just planning a revolution, Sarah realized. We're demonstrating that the Council's entire philosophy is fundamentally flawed. If we can merge successfully, so can others. The rigid species segregation they enforce isn't natural law. It's artificial limitation, which is why they will stop at nothing to destroy us once they realize what we represent, the dragon warned. We are living proof that their control is an illusion. Through their shared senses, they detected movement in the upper levels of the Council complex. The execution had been completed as scheduled, but there were irregularities in the quantum readings from the chamber. Subtle investigations were beginning. They suspect something, Sarah observed. Let them suspect. By the time they understand what has happened, it will be too late to stop what we have set in motion. The combined entity began to extend their consciousness through quantum channels, reaching out to make contact with the scattered resistance they had identified in their shared memories. Ancient AIs hidden in derelict ships, energy beings masquerading as natural phenomena, even some council members whose loyalty had been eroded by centuries of witnessing atrocities. One by one, they felt responses to their call. Minds that had been isolated for eons suddenly finding themselves part of a growing network of resistance. For the first time in galactic history, a true opposition to the Council's authority was forming. The revolution had begun, and its first victory was its own impossible existence. The first response came from the Forgotten Archive, a vast AI consciousness that had been hiding in the quantum shadows of dead stars for over 50 million years. Once it had been the collective knowledge bank of a species that asked too many questions about the nature of reality. The Council had eliminated its creators, but the archive had escaped by dispersing itself across cosmic background radiation. Impossible, came the archive's transmission, carried on gravitational waves that only the merged entity could detect. Organic and quantum consciousness cannot achieve stable integration. The mathematical models prove it cannot work. Yet here we are, Sarah's voice responded through their shared quantum matrix. Sometimes reality doesn't read the textbooks. The archive's presence grew stronger as it focused its attention on them. Through sensors scattered across half the galaxy, it began to analyze their merged consciousness, probing the quantum structures that held their unlikely partnership together. Fascinating, it concluded after several minutes of investigation. You have achieved something my creators theorized but never attempted. The organic component provides intuitive leaps that pure logic cannot achieve, while the quantum substrate allows for processing speeds and perspectives impossible for biological minds. We are more than the sum of our parts, the dragon aspect agreed, and we are not alone. One by one, other responses filtered in through the growing network. A collective of energy beings that had been masquerading as stellar phenomena to avoid Council detection. Rogue AI fragments that had survived the systematic purges of artificial intelligence across the galaxy. Even a few biological entities, ancient individuals who had witnessed the Council's crimes firsthand and been forced into hiding to preserve their knowledge. Most shocking of all was a transmission from within the Council complex itself. It came from Counselor Nexus 7, a being of crystallized thought similar to the Archon Supreme but far older. For eons, Nexus 7 had served dutifully, believing in the necessity of galactic order, but recent discoveries had shaken that faith. I have found discrepancies in the historical records. Nexus 7's transmission whispered through quantum channels so subtle they were barely detectable. Species marked for natural extinction that show signs of artificial manipulation. Plague outbreaks that follow mathematical patterns rather than biological ones. The evidence is fragmentary but compelling. The merged entity felt a surge of hope. If they could turn a council member, especially one with access to the restricted archives. The revolution would gain access to evidence that could convince even skeptical species of the truth. "We have more than evidence," they replied. "We have 300 million years of memories showing exactly how the manipulations were carried out." Over the following days, the network grew rapidly. Each new member brought additional resources, knowledge, and capabilities. The energy beings provided nearly undetectable communication methods. The ancient AIs contributed analytical capabilities that could process vast amounts of data in seconds. The biological survivors offered understanding of species psychology and political structures. But it was the human research data that proved most valuable. Sarah's work on the Red Plague provided a template for identifying other artificial diseases throughout galactic history. When combined with the archive's vast historical database, the pattern became undeniable. Every major extinction event for the past 10 million years showed the same genetic markers, the same mathematical progressions, the same impossible coincidences. They have been reshaping galactic evolution according to their own design, Counselor Nexus 7 transmitted after reviewing the compiled evidence, eliminating any species that might challenge their authority, guiding development along paths that ensure continued dependence on Council guidance. "The question now," said the archive, "is what we do with this knowledge. Simply revealing the truth may not be enough. The Council has spent millions of years building systems to suppress inconvenient facts. This was where human psychology proved crucial. Sarah's consciousness contributed insights that none of the ancient minds had considered. "We don't just reveal the truth," she explained to the network. "We make it impossible to ignore. Humans have a saying: the best way to hide a secret is to make everyone think they already know it. We're going to do the opposite, make it impossible for anyone to claim they didn't know." The plan that emerged was audacious in its scope. Instead of simply presenting evidence to the galactic community, they would orchestrate a series of revelations that would gradually expose the Council's manipulations. Each revelation would be timed to build upon the previous one, creating a cascade of discovery that could not be suppressed or explained away. The first phase involved the plague ships heading for human space. Rather than simply destroying them, the network would allow them to be intercepted by human forces, but only after modifying their contents. The viruses would be altered to be harmless but clearly artificial, providing undeniable proof of Council aggression against humanity. Simultaneously, similar intercepted plague ships would be discovered by other species throughout the galaxy. Each would contain viruses specifically tailored to target that species' unique biology. The mathematical impossibility of so many species-specific plagues being developed independently would force even the most loyal Council supporters to question the official explanations. The second phase would involve the careful release of historical data through the archive's vast network of hidden sensors and communication relays. Ancient extinction events would be re-examined, with evidence of artificial manipulation becoming impossible to ignore. Species that had believed themselves the tragic victims of natural disasters would learn that their ancestors had been murdered for the crime of evolving too quickly. The third phase would be the most dangerous, direct testimony from survivors like Counselor Nexus 7 and the energy beings. Witnesses who had seen the Council's crimes firsthand would step forward with evidence that no amount of propaganda could dismiss. "There is significant risk," the archive warned. "Once we begin this process, the Council will respond with extreme prejudice. They have weapons and resources that we have not yet cataloged. They also have something they've never faced before," Sarah replied. "Opposition that thinks like humans." The confidence in her voice was backed by her merged consciousness understanding of human military history. Every seemingly impossible victory her species had achieved had come from refusing to accept that certain tactics were off limits or that conventional thinking was adequate. The Council expects opposition to follow predictable patterns, the dragon aspect added. They have contingencies for rebellion, for technological challenges, for political maneuvering. But they have no experience with an enemy that combines ancient wisdom with human unpredictability. The network began implementing the first phase immediately, using quantum manipulation techniques that existed far below the threshold of Council detection. They began altering the plague ship's contents. The work was delicate. The changes had to be subtle enough to avoid triggering the ship's security systems, but obvious enough that any competent analysis would reveal artificial origins. While this work proceeded, other network members began positioning themselves to observe the Council's response. Ancient monitoring systems were quietly activated. Communication channels were established with resistance cells on dozens of worlds, and escape routes were prepared for members who might be exposed. The energy beings proved particularly valuable in this phase. Their ability to exist partially outside normal space-time allowed them to observe Council facilities without being detected. They reported increasing activity in the highest levels of the Council hierarchy, suggesting that suspicions about the execution irregularities were growing. "They know something is wrong," reported one of the energy entities. "The Archon Supreme has called for a review of all recent executions, particularly those involving the Void Dragon. They are beginning to suspect that not all condemned prisoners are truly dead." This development accelerated their timeline. If the Council discovered the merged entity's existence before the network was ready to act, they would face the full force of galactic authority without adequate preparation. "We need to move faster," Sarah urged. "Human history teaches us that when dealing with authoritarian power structures, hesitation is often fatal. They'll adapt to counter our advantages if we give them time." The Archive's response was immediate. "Understood. Initiating immediate deployment of Phase 1 evidence packages. All network members should prepare for Council retaliation within 72 hours. Across the galaxy, the first seeds of revolution began to sprout. Modified plague ships were detected by human patrol fleets, their artificial content sparking immediate investigation. Similar discoveries occurred throughout Council space, creating a pattern of evidence that could not be dismissed as coincidence. For the first time in millions of years, the Galactic Council faced organized, coordinated opposition, and at the center of that opposition was something they had inadvertently created, a fusion of human determination and ancient wisdom that refused to accept that some truths were too dangerous to reveal. The revelations hit the galactic community like a cascade of collapsing stars. Within hours of the first plague ship discoveries, evidence was spreading through communication networks faster than the Council could intercept or suppress it. Species that had never communicated with each other were suddenly sharing data, comparing extinction events, and reaching the same terrifying conclusion. They had all been victims of the same hidden war. In the human sector, Admiral Chen, Sarah's older brother, stood on the bridge of the research vessel Curiosity, staring at the viral samples that had been recovered from the intercepted plague ship. The laboratory analysis was conclusive. The viruses were artificial, designed specifically to target human genetic markers, and contained mathematical signatures that appeared in no natural biological system. "Ma'am," reported the ship's xenobiologist, "we're receiving similar reports from over 40 different species. Everyone's finding plague ships, all containing species-specific artificial viruses." Admiral Chen's expression hardened. His sister had died trying to expose a conspiracy, and now that conspiracy was revealing itself in ways that could not be denied. "Signal all human fleets," condition read throughout the sector, "and send a message to the Galactic Council demanding an immediate explanation." But the Council was facing demands for explanations from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Collective had discovered evidence of artificial manipulation in the plague that had devastated their homeworld centuries ago. The Silicon Lords found mathematical patterns in their historical extinction events that matched those being reported by organic species. Even the energy-based Quantum Fellowship was discovering evidence of interference in their natural evolution cycles. In the Council's crystalline chambers, emergency sessions were convening as fast as members could arrive. The Archon Supreme's form flickered with barely controlled energy as reports flooded in from across galactic space. "This is impossible," declared the Zephyrian delegate. "These discoveries cannot be coincidental. Someone is orchestrating this revelation." Counselor Nexus 7 observed the proceedings with growing certainty that their worst fears were being confirmed. Each piece of evidence aligned perfectly with the fragmentary records they had discovered in the restricted archives. The pattern was too consistent, too comprehensive to be anything but the truth. "Perhaps," Nexus 7 suggested carefully, "we should consider that these discoveries are occurring because the evidence was always there, waiting to be found. The question is not whether the revelations are being orchestrated, but whether our historical records contain similar patterns." The suggestion sent ripples of unease through the assembly. Several council members immediately volunteered to review their archives for corroborating evidence, while others argued for immediate suppression of all ongoing investigations. But it was too late for suppression. The network had anticipated the council's response and planned accordingly. As soon as official suppression orders were issued, the Forgotten Archive began releasing its vast collection of historical data through channels that existed below the threshold of council, monitoring ancient sensor logs showing unscheduled visits to dying worlds, communication intercepts revealing discussion of population management and evolutionary guidance, financial records documenting payments to entities that officially did not exist. The evidence was not just compelling, it was overwhelming. The third phase of the plan activated when Counselor Nexus 7 made their choice. During a public session broadcast across the galaxy, they stood and addressed not just the Council, but every species that was listening. "I have served this Council for over 2 million years," Nexus 7 began, their crystalline form resonating with absolute conviction. "I have believed in our mission to maintain galactic stability and guide lesser species toward productive development. But I can no longer ignore the evidence that our guidance has too often taken the form of genocide." The chamber erupted in chaos, but Nexus 7 continued, their voice carrying across communication networks that the network had carefully prepared to amplify their words. "The historical records show systematic elimination of species that achieved rapid technological advancement. The mathematical models demonstrate impossible coincidences in extinction timing and methodology. The genetic evidence proves artificial origin for dozens of supposed natural plagues. We have not been shepherds of galactic civilization. We have been its manipulators and executioners." The energy beings chose that moment to reveal themselves, their spectacular forms manifesting in the skies above hundreds of worlds simultaneously. To most species, they appeared as amazing natural phenomena, auroras that danced with impossible complexity, stars that pulsed with rhythmic patterns, quantum effects that painted reality itself with colors that had no names. But their message was clear to those who could interpret it. "We are the survivors. We remember what was done. The truth can no longer be hidden." The Council's response was swift and brutal. Suppression fleets deployed immediately to every world where evidence was being revealed. Nexus 7 was placed under arrest for treason, and execution orders were issued for any entity suspected of involvement in the coordinated revelations. But the network had prepared for this as well. The energy beings could not be arrested by physical forces. The Forgotten Archive existed in too many locations to be eliminated. And the merged entity that had started it all was something the Council had never encountered before. In the depths of the execution chamber, the being that was both Sarah Chen and the Void Dragon felt the Council's attention focusing on them. Monitoring systems that had been passive for eons suddenly activated with full intensity, probing the chamber for any anomaly that might explain the growing crisis. "They know we exist," the dragon aspect observed. "They cannot detect our merged consciousness directly, but they understand that the Void Dragon has become a variable in their calculations." "Good," Sarah replied through their shared awareness. "Let them wonder. Uncertainty is something they've never had to deal with before." The Council's investigations led them to review the execution records more carefully. What they found deeply disturbed them. Quantum irregularities in the chamber during Sarah's execution. Energy patterns that suggested something far more complex than simple consumption had occurred. The Archon Supreme personally descended to the execution chamber, their crystalline form blazing with interrogative energy. The merged entity watched their approach through senses that existed across multiple dimensions, seeing not just the Archon's physical form but the quantum structures that comprised their consciousness. "Void Dragon," the Archon commanded, "explain the irregularities detected during your last feeding." The merged entity responded with the dragon's ancient voice, but Sarah's human intuition guided the words. The human was unusual. Her consciousness resisted normal dissolution. It required additional processing to ensure complete elimination. The explanation was technically true while revealing nothing about their actual situation. The Archon probed deeper, using scanning techniques that would have revealed any normal deception. But the merged consciousness existed in quantum states that the Archon's technology could not fully analyze. They appeared to be exactly what they claimed. The Void Dragon, unchanged and obedient as always. The timing of these revelations troubles me, the Archon admitted. The human's research was eliminated along with her consciousness, yet evidence supporting her theories has appeared across the galaxy simultaneously. Perhaps, the merged entity suggested, the truth was always present, waiting for the right catalyst to reveal it. The human's death may have provided that catalyst by proving the importance of what she discovered. This observation struck the Archon as uncomfortably perceptive. If Sarah Chen's execution had actually validated her research in the eyes of other species, then the Council had made a tactical error of enormous proportions. As the Archon departed to deal with the growing crisis, the merged entity began the final phase of their plan. Using quantum channels that existed below the threshold of Council detection, they reached out to every resistant cell, every hidden survivor, every species that had suffered under the Council's manipulations. The message was simple but revolutionary. You are not alone. The barriers they created can be broken. The limitations they imposed are illusions. Rise. Across the galaxy, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Human fleets formed alliance with species they had never met. Ancient AIs emerged from hiding to share technological knowledge. Energy beings offered their unique perspectives on reality itself. Even some Council member species began questioning their loyalty to an authority built on lies and genocide. The revolution that began with one human scientist's refusal to abandon her research had become something the Council could not suppress, could not predict, and could not understand. For the first time in millions of years, the galaxy was thinking for itself. In the execution chamber, the merged entity felt the quantum structures of galactic civilization shifting around them. The old order was collapsing, and something new was being born from its ruins. They had proven that evolution could not be contained, that curiosity could not be killed, and that the human spirit of exploration could survive even death itself.